Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for many people out there. And today, we are honored to be rejoined on the episode by Yael Elish, Chief Executive Officer and founder of StuffThatWorks, this really interesting company in Israel that offers an online platform where people suffering from various chronic diseases can share information to ultimately learn which treatments work best for their condition based on the experiences of their peers, combined with a really smart AI-based crowdsourcing system. And just last week, StuffThatWorks announced the alpha launch of their product, OpenStuff, which represents this first, as they say, patient-powered AI health search built on over 1.3 billion structured data points, 3 million people participating, something like 1,250 different chronic conditions, ultimately focused on transforming live patient health experiences into what they call real-time actionable insights. Yael is a really passionate entrepreneur. She was on the founding team of Waze, which is now a subsidiary company of Google, providing satellite navigation software on smartphones and computers. She also founded both eSnips and NetSnippet, was also part of the senior management team that took Commtouch to its successful NASDAQ IPO in 2000. And a lot of really cool topics to get back into today. Really excited to hear about the launch and honored to have her back with us. Yael Elish, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show today.
Hey, Ira, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, no, great having you. I'm looking forward to getting into everything about OpenStuff and seeing where the product is going. But yeah, again, before we get there, love to sort of reintroduce the audience to you. Obviously, the idea, as we talked last time, for what StuffThatWorks, its inception, what has ultimately been created, had to do with you, searching for, ultimately cures and treatments for family members and finding out there was not a proper platform out there. Take us back a little bit and talk about what was the genesis for the company to begin with again.
Sure. So this is going to be, we're going to be talking most of the time about OpenStuff, which is the new AI health search platform that is running on top of the crowdsourcing effort that we've launched several years ago. Mm-hmm. And in essence, I started StuffThatWorks when I realized that there is no organized information about treatments and generally conditions and how they operate in the real world. So I found myself with personal problems with family members and chronic issues coming up and no solutions, one more doctor, different treatment, trying lots of things, and it was just not getting better. And I was just frantically researching online for years and years because I just knew that there has to be something out there. It's somehow intuitive that you feel that there has to be a solution, whether it's a better diagnosis or a different treatment that would work. And I did end up finding over and over again treatments that worked to the point of remission. And when I realized that, and I saw that this is happening with others as well, it became very clear to me that there's a big problem with information. And I started researching it a little bit and realized that there's no organized information about what happens in real world with chronic conditions. So it was almost mind-boggling to me that people are living with chronic conditions for years and years, and no one is really tracking in a centralized data-centric form, how the condition is with them, how it changes over time, what are the treatments that they're trying, what works, what doesn't work, what's detrimental, what does it even treat, how are treatments changing over time, what are the side effects, who are these people, what are their other problems, where are conditions coming from? It was just like endless, and I'm curious about that generally, but when I started to look at it, it was just there was just no solution. And everyone kept telling me, yes, but we have, this is published research, and we do PROs, and there's real world evidence, and there's this and there's that, and all sorts of felt like there's a solution, and somehow, it doesn't come down to people. Like, people realize that there isn't a solution, and they go in millions and tens of millions to online groups and ask for solutions. So, obviously there are no solutions because it doesn't work. And then when I started researching, when I thought I was going to start a company around that, then I realized that it's a huge problem for pharma as well. Pharma, the 90 billion annual drug development process, where with huge losses, all of them coming from, most of them coming from lack of access to patients and adequate data. So, I got intrigued about it, especially when, I could see already the solution. Being a product person, I could see what I want to do. Coming from Waze, I already knew what the power of crowdsourcing could be, and I already had a vision of how to do that, because, Waze was a big problem, traffic, but it's still not as big as people's health. So if people join forces and build maps and real-time traffic, for sure they will build crowdsourcing. They will crowdsource and contribute information for what is extremely painful for them, on a daily basis, which is health.
Right.
So this is how I started StuffThatWorks. And again, being a product person, I wanted to have this have foundations of data, like powerful data collection foundation that would be, because you can't argue with data, right? People go to the doctor, they found this, they found that, they can be very easily dismissed. But with data, no one can argue. And with data is something doctors want to publish, they want to know about. So data is very powerful. This is why immediately I thought I was going to do that in a, powerful data capabilities, normalized, consistent, and even go, way beyond. And that's like a completely separate topic, but standardize the collection across all conditions, so that for a change, we will have, not only looking at one condition at a time, but like looking at everything in a consistent manner, like all conditions with the same exact data collected for all patients in each condition. This is what makes it, I think, very powerful. So we started that 6-7 years ago. Today, 3 million patients across 1,250 conditions, chronic conditions, including cancer, rare, and any from mundane to the rarest conditions. And then we opened 1.3 billion data points, which with consistent data means derivatives of about 100 billion combinations of data. And we've opened the alpha of OpenStuff, AI health search, which really, is really the most exciting thing that has happened for the company, to date. And I think for everyone, because, I don't want to keep on talking, but we try to externalize information. Our goal was always to bring information back to patients. Like, all this crowdsourcing effort was for patients. This is why we called it StuffThatWorks. We did a lot of work to externalize insights and information. The site is full of data, but it's still a fraction of what can be extracted, especially if people are interested in something, specific. So that's the first time that you could really just come in and search the data in such a simple way, just, a simple question that would, in essence, run a complex query at the back end and provide an answer.
Got it. I mean, yeah, again, and it's been quite a journey the last several years as you put together this quite impressive. You were mentioning the size of it here in terms of 3 million patients and, well over 1,200 different diseases, everything from rare conditions to chronic, and then obviously everything from symptoms to treatments to disease burden and so forth. Take a little time now, because obviously that data source and that foundation is clearly key in the sense that when everyone says, oh, okay, what's the difference here with OpenStuff compared to just me throwing stuff into ChatGPT or Google search, and clearly this is very important that this is structured, crowdsourced data. It doesn't bring in all the nonsense that the rest of all the other stuff out there that we don't want in terms of making these decisions. And then, of course, the types of reasoning, and I'm talking outside my sphere here, but I'd love for you to take us sort of into the realm of some of the AI reasoning magic that has to deal with this very nuanced type of data versus what's the best treatment for this disease that also have these conditions and so forth versus just sort of general AI systems that don't really have access to real-time patient outcome data, because I think this is it makes you very different again from some of the traditional search engines out there, AI search engines that are just taking everything in. So I want you to walk us through that a bit because I think it's important.
Absolutely. So it's a very good question. AI is only as good as the data it runs on. That's the key point. Right. And when AI goes out, it's a summarizer in essence. It's trying to make sense of the information that it encounters. So when it all goes to the open web, it encounters many different sources. They could be reliable, they could be non-reliable, they could be a combination of everything, but still this is not data. This is unstructured information that AI has to make sense of. It's not data. So it can be an interesting summarizer, it can provide accurate information, but it's not research grade data, powered by numbers. So you cannot, compare numbers, you cannot look at numbers, you cannot talk numbers. This is just information, and it can be also error prone. So the big difference here is that this is data that's curated, controlled in a very, very specific way, by the way, extremely efficient way. If you compare to any other data, building effort, it's like extremely cost effective. It's constantly up to date. It covers like the tiniest possible areas and the diversities, and it's large scale. So when it's organized as data and when it's consistent across all conditions, you're dealing basically with a huge, call it Excel file, where every patient has the exact same data normalized across all conditions in the exact same way. It's extremely powerful when you look at it across 1,250 conditions. So what are the early symptoms for a condition? You can look at it as the most reported for a condition, for example, or you can look at it as the more indicative, because then you get to compare that across 1,250 conditions. So you can say, okay, these are very common, but they exist in other conditions. What makes this condition, like what are the symptoms that make, or the early symptoms that make this condition unique? So you have this cross-condition capabilities, you have the data crossing capabilities, and it's at least 60 parameters per patient, meaning that you can crisscross the entire data set on that for the condition and cross-condition. And then on top of that, there's a lot of additional information. Then we're getting into geospatial data layers that are consented and added by patients, getting into wearable, getting into EMR data. But again, the entire idea is that it's always consistent in how it's organized and how it's kept per patient. So this is true research, number driven, large number driven, by the way. So even for the rarest conditions, we would have, largest numbers at least seen in the industry. And this is very powerful. In contrast, you have the open web, unreliable. Then you would have vertical AI efforts. So for example, open evidence that is deciding to just narrow the scope of what it's looking at. It's licensing data from medical publications and developing specific AI that would make sense and would be able to be accurate and hallucination free, I guess, as possible based on the data publications. But it's not numbers; it's more of a summarizer of information and findings. This is not. So again, here a difference would be that this is a summarizer of existing research when what we're doing is new data and real-time research, because a question is basically a querying of endless combinations of data and comparisons and things that generate new information in real time, which is very, very different.
I think that's a really interesting piece of this that you're mentioning here, and I'd say I want to emphasize that sort of the real time, because even in the world of scientific publications that a clinician might run into, I mean, even that sort of is delayed from the time that work is done and peer reviewed and ultimately gets out into the medical community. And here again, you could I'd love for you to give some examples that are pertinent in from your angle that you've seen, but something that not just where, hey, the patient can say, okay, I can put my symptoms, I can compare it to peers, again, that have used different therapies, but at the same time, the clinicians on the opposite side of that, because obviously there's this shared decision making that goes on, the clinician is also there, able to see this sort of personalization, which is such a hot topic, of course, in healthcare nowadays, immediately, as this data evolves in real time. And again, I think that's important to stress. And if there's any interesting examples, I mean, I'm sure there's many that you run across that sort of show the, again, that patient clinician, merging of the real world impact. I think that's a very important piece of this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm always thinking of publications, and we have experience with publications because there were publications made using the StuffThatWorks data. So we've seen the process. And publications are very narrow. Again, and they have to collect data from scratch, and they have to collect patients from scratch, and they'll always be dealing with, so they'll do the collection and like gathering of information from scratch, will be limited in size, and we'll research a very narrow physician decided or researcher decided area, and it will take years, months and months and years. We're now, for example, a patient advocacy group that has done research with us is like taking, I don't want to say like more than 2 years, 3 years to publish really basic information describing the population of the condition. So it's taking years. It's I would say, I don't know, probably 1% of what we have describing this population, and this is the research that is being published. So, and I'm writing a piece right now, an article about real world experience, or this new data category that we have. We call it patient connected real world experience. Yeah. And it's a new category, it's a new data category, and it's both a category and the content and real time, and like transformation of research for being real time. So it's new data and a new way of actually dealing with data and conducting research, which is almost near immediate. So from finding something to publishing it, so you have the information, what you found, you could ask for supporting information, supporting data, and that saves months and months and months from publication, and you can go wherever you want, comparing cohorts, different, like just go on endlessly and be very, very time efficient in releasing this data. But the concept is, do you need to publish everything? Like everything needs to be publicized and like take years and years to get to the realm of everyone? No, and I think it needs to be immediate. It needs to be accessible for, to anyone and immediately. So when I was writing this piece, I was writing, when it was actually, I think, a commentary about open evidence and the 6 billion valuation, the recent 6 billion valuation, saying this is amazing. I love open evidence, physicians, it's really transformative. Everyone is like, it's so addictive to have instant answers, as opposed to like searching the old ways and the old way and all that. But looking at research overall, it's not like this huge problem of real world information. It's not addressed, that's like this data doesn't exist. How can you treat patients with chronic conditions without really knowing, what's going on? You don't have this data. Clinical indicators, which you can't base much on clinical indicators. They exist only for a small handful of conditions. And for most conditions, it's the subjective aspect that is not even captured, right? And then, treatment is based on protocol, no combination of, patient, comorbidities, age of onset, nothing. It's like protocol, trial, error, and so on.
Right.
Publications are very, narrow. Clinical trials are very narrow and controlled. But I think that there's this difficulty to admit that you don't know, right? So the world is not really there. I think, we're in a place where this is a new data category. It's much appreciated, maybe as an addition today to clinical data, which is like extremely valued, like the clinical aspect. And just because this is how things are done, just because there's no way to really get to this, there isn't a way to collect this information. So, you get used to think that this is that you have it figured out, and you're really treating patients in, how they should be treated and based on data, but you don't have data. You don't really have information about patients in real world and treatment and effectiveness.
Right.
And so the piece I'm writing is basically saying, you have to be modest about what you know and what you don't know, and start being more respectful to, patient reported or patient contributed experience, which has always been very, looked down at and dismissed. So to me, this is really fascinating that for the first time, the patient coming for information is turning into data. And when it's data, it's powerful, and you can no longer ignore it. There's been this discussion in the pharma world about putting the patients around the table, blah, 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 blah. Talk and talk, but there's nothing to it. And it will only be taken seriously when there's like real information coming, about the real efficacy, the real effectiveness of drugs, how Wegovy really compares with this, that, and that in the long term. Like, why do people stop? What is the difference in the side effect and so on? So think about it. This, for example, is just almost like an iPhone. Like half of the world's population is going to be taking the GLP, the drugs, the GLP-1s, and there isn't really, at scale data about how this operates in the real world and on who. It's different from person to person. No one really is capturing this data.
Let's go further down that road, because the last time we chatted about back in January, you had, I think, just then published your barriers in clinical trials paper about looking at the sort of the patient demand out there for access to clinical trials and so forth. And I thought again, what you're bringing up is extremely interesting now that OpenStuff is live, and thinking about this potential for going beyond the traditional pharma biotech research model, as you were mentioning before. There's a in papers, very obviously a limited way we structure these studies, and same thing in clinical trials. And there's all sorts of things that the industry just doesn't do. From obviously there's all the unmet stuff that we just don't study. Then there's the whole area of repurposing that people would love to study, but there's no money behind it if it's generic, all that. New indications, like you're mentioning with the GLPs, that we've studied parts of it, but there could be 100 other indications out there. Subpopulations, of course. The potential here for all sorts of novel pharma biotech research is amazing. It's probably the most exciting part to me. And I'd like you to take us a little down that path, because this is really, a really unique opportunity, I think, what you have here.
Yeah, I also really love the part where it connects to pharma and drug development, and where it can really make add a lot of information that has never been captured before, but even in the biggest, solve many of the biggest spaces that exist today. So already today we're seeing drug repurposing signals that emerge from the platform. Very easy, with not much effort. So we're looking at that, and that's part of it, and it's a very big area that pharma invests in, and that should invest in. But again, from looking at from the efficacy, like from the patient actual results point of view, I think makes the process also shorter, or at least allows it to start maybe from a different direction and check backwards. So drug repurposing, but you have two other areas that are huge and making clinical trials extremely inefficient, timely, bleeding a lot of time and money, and especially when trials and drugs are becoming more and more specialized, and the population that needs to join needs to be more specific and more specialized. So the biggest areas today in pharma, like the biggest challenges, are lack of access to patients, seen in patient recruitment, which is 40% of budget, 80% of cause of delays. The site-specific model doesn't work, so sites fail to actually recruit the patients that they were supposed to recruit. To go out to advertise, you have no places, no inventories where you can really advertise to people, because it's self-regulated. The big players, Google, Facebook, they know what you have, but they will not advertise to you. So you have to do this, wide advertisement, non-targeted, very costly process to screen the patients and so on. So the area of patient recruitment, when you have no access and you have no information about the patients, is very, very difficult, and that the site dependency is also extremely difficult. And then inadequate information, inadequate real-world data used in protocol and feasibility and protocol planning. Again, huge delays, about 3.5 protocol amendments that are happening throughout the process, where about 70% are just inadequate information about who the patients are. So you have researchers defining protocols, but it's completely disconnected from who are the patients, what do they need, what bothers them, what are the key symptoms, how does the real world differ, in this specific site subtype, and so on. What are they willing to do? What are they not willing to do? 30% dropout rates again. So these two areas, not to speak about the real world phase 4, but even just in the drug development process itself, this combination of not having access to patients, not having adequate data, makes everything 10 to 12-month delay in each of these two categories, and huge costs. So when you have a unified platform, we're seeing that as an opportunity to streamline the entire drug development process, with also thoughts of how to get away from the most problematic issue, which is the site centricity that limits you to a fraction of patients. So, right, if you have patients throughout the US, let's say you have 100 patients there, and they have to be near the sites. So you eliminate 95% of patients who could participate, and doctors are not participating in the clinical trials. So this combination of not being eligible, your doctor doesn't know, doesn't offer you we spoke about that last time.
Yep.
So people have exhausted treatment options, but they have no access. Their doctor never spoke to them about a clinical trial and so on. So it's very, very, very broken. And having this combination of patients' data, instant access, and an ability to actually have an AI flow for the information, the data, and so on. I didn't even talk about the other massive data problem, which is EMRs being typed manually into the EDC system, spread across different sites, merge into lots of errors. Like it's really just, from someone coming from the outside and being a product and data person, it's just the worst flow ever possible for streamlining anything that you can imagine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, since we control, I mean, since we have access to patients and we have access to their data, and we're only growing with the integrated EMR integration input and all these things, then next step is to streamline and to solve this bottleneck of 5%, which is this is what we aim to do next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, one other area that I wanted to ask about, we didn't touch on it last time, but I think it's come to the fore now that the platform is live, and that's sort of the whole area of supporting patient advocacy programs. Because again, whether we're talking about rare disease, which obviously you have a lot of participation there in this system, and that's alone thousands of conditions, hundreds of millions of patients, a lot which are orphan and rare. And again, the ability to using a system like this, finally put together some of the evidence with these much smaller disease sets, help identify and ultimately create policy in rare disease, but also for maybe much more popular diseases. I know there was an interesting example I saw, thinking about something like fibromyalgia, which is a huge thing, but we don't have our hands sort of like on what we should be doing about it per se, because it touches on many different sort of segments. But either way, I mean, I think what you created here and creating an open resource for all sorts of advocacy to ultimately make the proper decisions and ultimately lead to the proper policy efforts. I was wondering if you could talk just a few minutes about that as well, because I think that's a very important piece of the whole healthcare system nowadays. So take us down there.
Yeah. So I mean, from the get-go, the purpose of this company was to empower patients, empower advocacy groups, empower research, and that is always going to be free. So for the nonprofit, the people and nonprofits, we put as much power as possible in the platform to be able to access the platform free. And by the way, the alpha version is only a fraction of what already exists in the data set. For example, we have rare disease with specific genes that have not been normalized yet, and like so that's not a lot of very valuable information that is not really available yet, like for people to find each other based on gene. In cancers, again, the specific mutation. So we're still a small company, very small company, and we're picking pick and choose what exactly we're gonna work on and release. So this is a very initial version, but the goal is always to empower, So this is where I'm coming from. This is where we've refused, like even when like in the earlier days when we struggled with monetization, we refused deals that will not be in support of our goal, that would change our data structure, that would not be in favor of patients, that would not be in favor of patient advocacy groups, and so on. So this is always going to be our number one goal. And I think that when you compare to registries, this is a live registry that otherwise would cost a lot of money for patient advocacy groups to to put together. And this is constantly updated. And the beauty about crowdsourcing is that you have this data patient connected in the system, so you can always add. In Waze, this magic is like, once you get to experience this thing, is so powerful that if there's a buy-in to the vision with the audience, users or patients, you could put a feature out there or a demand or a request or whatever, and within 1 week, you would populate this category. So for example, in Waze, we decided to add gas stations and pricing.
Okay.
So, the feature goes out. Within weeks, the world is mapped with gas stations and real-time pricing. And then, businesses. We decided to add businesses to the map. So you have this thing where it's live. It constantly grows. It constantly updates. And if there's something that you don't have, you can always go back and integrate it. So research is free. Research is going to be free it's already free to nonprofit organizations. And if anything is missing, we're also integrating a feature that allows to ask this question and augment the database. And yeah, so this is where we're going. I hope this answers. I'm not sure that this was your exact question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. And again, I just wanted to, again, thinking across that, patient, clinician, clinical trials, and advocacy. Clearly you filled in all the gaps there, and thinking about, who's going to be using this system, and ultimately, as you were saying, it's not 100% out there yet, but nonetheless, this is the alpha, and
it takes time. It really takes time for something new to get adopted. So I remember also in the Waze days, we kind of people were using it in the beginning to navigate to places they didn't know. And this wasn't what it was intended for, because it was intended to getting you the fastest route to commute, for example, home, work, places that you do know.
Right.
And it took us a long time. Like, it takes people a long time to understand that new value that they're getting. It's not just people; it's also the industry. So new concepts take time. But I think that the AI and OpenStuff, for the first time, is kind of shedding light on what was actually collected there and what's possible when you do that. This is really what I'm so excited about, that this was kind of a black box for many years, and it was really difficult to explain what is it that we really have there. Yeah, symptoms, treatment, side effect. Okay, it never really resonated with anyone. And I think that even our dev team, I think only today is like seeing the whole mechanism of the consistency and like all that was created, and that's becoming possible there. So these are exciting days for me, for us.
Yeah. Could you just, give us a couple, if we look over the horizon a little bit, you mentioned things obviously like the morass that electronic medical records represent. And clearly, if you solve that, that's a $250 issue. Wearables and integrating, all the next generation data that's going to be pouring in from all that stuff. Oh, take us a little bit out, if you would. What excites you? Where are we headed in 2026 in terms of the company? And then anything else that I missed while we have you today? Obviously it's been a major evolution since we chatted several months ago, but take us out a little bit too.
So the company has actually already integrated those. So we've already created the infrastructure and also collected so patients are already sharing. So we have the geospatial data, and we have the wearable data, so Apple Health, and EMR data, at least a partial implementation with Epic that we're planning on working on, but it's like 1, 2, 3, and the data is downloaded. We have another data collection mechanism that is what we call the daily updates, but in essence, people are updating on an ongoing basis. So all the changes. So it's not like a one-time retrospective. It's like on an ongoing basis. the changes in how you feel, in the treatments that you've changed, in the dosage, in the side effects, and the symptoms, and daily events, daily lives, and so on. And we also created a remote treatment monitoring platform that is actually has a clinician at the other side that is actually also engaging with the patient. So this is forming, again, very consistent structured data. The platform is showing amazing. So, you know, always the problem when I started this, I was told, listen, if you have to have patients proactively contribute information, it's not going to work. Try to find for something passive, because, you know, we know that like after 1 or 2 months, patients stop like reporting proactively or on anything. This is like a known failure in the industry. And we're seeing here in this platform that like the daily updates and the clinic, 70% retention rates over periods of 8 months. It's been working on an obesity, clinic producing amazing data. So for us, next is, and by the way, that we have a very interesting history as a company. I mean, I think it's a different conversation, but recapitalized, restarted the company recently and all. So all these foundations exist. Now we're going in 2 directions. We're fundraising for the purpose of getting into the clinical trials, commercializing, and changing all the areas that I mentioned, from recruitment to protocol. It's basically commercializing what we already have and addressing the biggest problem, which is the limitation to the 5% of patients, as opposed to opening it up to the 95%.
Right.
And deepening the data set. So now, by beginning to roll out all the things that we've already developed across across the entire user base, and growing. So growing. Obviously, the more value you create for patients, the more people will join, the better the data, and so on. So this is like almost 2 different areas of the company. One is continuing to create value, so value data contribution, and then on the other side is growing, where we found ourselves in the pharma area, in both patient recruitment and protocol. So data dashboards and data for supporting clinical trials decision making.
Well, it's again, it's been impressive to see the evolution of it from the last time we chatted, and I look forward to seeing what continues to happen and as you continue to grow. But it's again, it's as I said last time, it's an amazing model. I love that you bring together these 4 pillars of patient, clinician, clinical trials, and advocacy, and really wishing you and then your team the best with this as you continue to evolve it into 2026. But really impressive work again, for everybody out there that's going to be listening to this episode of our show across the various podcast networks, or who will be watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Yael Elish, Chief Executive Officer and founder of StuffThatWorks. We will put the link to the company as well as to the alpha launch site of OpenStuff, their amazing patient-powered AI health search engine, in the show notes. But Yael, again, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and update us on what you have going on there at StuffThatWorks. Thank you for everything you continue to do to improve patient lives. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through this type of tech development. Really an awesome story, and I look forward to continuing to follow it.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you again.
Great having you.